This week's acquittal of President Trump in the U.S. Senate is only the latest example of a political decision on partisan lines and reflecting a partisan divide throughout the country. But for the ethical watchdogs at Common Cause, this latest impeachment process was a very different case with consequences for the fundamentals of democracy, elections, accountability, and transparency. To explain the group's first ever support of impeachment is the Assistant Director of Common Cause Massachusetts, Kristina Mensik. Thank you very much for being with us, Kristina.
Thank you for having me.
First, I want to start with what happened, I think, probably well before this week. This is the first time in 50 years that Common Cause has taken a position on a possible impeachment of a president. So what made this case different?
Sure. Well, first, I should say that Common Cause called for the impeachment of President Trump after years of evidence and careful consideration. We called for an impeachment inquiry this summer after the full Mueller report was released. We then called for the full impeachment of President Trump and his removal from office after the incontrovertible evidence that came out surrounding the Ukraine scandal. This builds on a long track record that goes back to his campaign and campaign finance violations by surrounding the Stormy Daniels case.
Now, I think what I see in a number of the concerns of Common Cause here are what you might call violations of transparency. Which would you say are the most important?
Well, he has attempted to stonewall the impeachment inquiry. That was certainly just one of the reasons that we called for his full impeachment and removal. But the case of Ukraine was about bribery. It was about abuse of power, and it was also about campaign finance violations. So in our case for impeachment, we lay out the multiple elements of our justification for calling for his impeachment. And that is just one of the reasons.
And of course, the other thing, going back to the Mueller report, and I know this was not one of the articles of impeachment, but the meddling in the election and Trump's behavior, maybe not necessarily collusion, but what did you see there?
Well, responding from an organization that is charged with democracy reform and particularly election security, Trump's unwillingness to even give Putin a slap on the wrist for what we know was meddling in the 2016 elections is not only unacceptable for a sitting president. We know that he did that because that is the politically advantageous thing to do, but it imperils the future of our 2020 elections. We are calling for more volunteers than ever to work on our election protection programs and serve as poll monitors, in large part because of the risk that we feel that President Trump is to the security of our elections.
Now, a lot of us watching this, especially as it went from the House of Representatives to the Senate, we saw these news stories about coordination between the Republicans in the Senate and people in the White House. Mm-hmm. So there is a sense here that this was not an objective, impartial kind of trial. But on the other hand, what I see here also is that if the senators, at least the majority, don't want witnesses and documents, and if the president doesn't want them, the rules say, well, you can do that.
Sure. Well, those rules are one thing and precedent is another. What we know is that, one, impeachment is not something that we take lightly, but for the impeachment of sitting presidents, the two that had Senate trials, those trials heard witnesses, and they heard witnesses who had not been heard in the House. Senate Republicans' refusal to hear witnesses made this trial, I believe, a sham trial. It is hard to see it as much less than a cover-up.
Now, of course, you can get some of the same facts from other sources, but let me put it this way. If you try to imagine, what if Mulvaney had to be a witness, what if Pompeo or even the Attorney General, William Barr, do you think that would have made a different impression on the average person in this country?
I think it would have. I think that one of the reasons that Trump has made it clear he is a threat to the future of our democracy is because he has capitalized on distrust in democratic institutions. He has capitalized on misinformation. And I think that to hear directly from those who are involved in his administration, even if they, I think it would have made a difference. We call for a very open and transparent government in every respect, and that includes trials and public trials where American people can hear directly from those who are implicated in the Trump administration's abuses of office.
This has been news, and we're talking with Kristina Mensik from Common Cause, Massachusetts. Kristina, the immediate aftermath of the acquittal vote in the Senate has been depicted as sort of demoralizing for people who are basically the anti-Trump part of the country. But you held a rally right after this. Some of the anti-Trump side, I guess, was out there. What was your takeaway from that?
I'll say honestly that Wednesday morning I was feeling, as I said at the rally, despondent. But what happened when we had hundreds of people out there that night who had the opportunity to not only turn their anger into action, but to either realize for the first time or learn again the power of collective action. There has never been a more important moment in our democracy for building the kind of fully participatory democracy that we need, not just at Common Cause, but across the map, to be able to hold our government accountable, to redress political inequality, and to really fix our democracy so that we can have a sustainable democracy.
Now, as I mentioned before, there is this playing by the rules, at least the letter of the rules in the acquittal vote. But do you worry about what this could mean in the future, even if it's a president from a different party and senators from a different party?
Do you mean, do I worry about?
In other words, being able to say, no, we don't want to give you any witnesses. We don't want to turn over documents.
Oh, absolutely. I'm worried because what the Senate Republicans have done is given Trump the green light to solicit further interference in our elections. They've given him the green light. Rudy Giuliani was it Wednesday, said that he thinks Trump should go ahead and keep investigating Biden, who Trump perceives to be his political rival. It's a scary moment. I think that a very dangerous precedent has been set, but I think that we know those reforms that can help us defend against the risks that precedent allows.
Now, what about reforms that Common Cause is backing in the future? What do you think are the most important right now?
Sure. Undoubtedly, we need to continue the fight to limit the influence of money in politics. That includes publicly funded elections. It includes strengthening donor disclosures. It includes overturning Citizens United. On the other hand, we must continue to reduce barriers to political participation. In Massachusetts, that has been, in many ways, our main fight. We have passed automatic voter registration, early voting, and right now we are in the midst of a campaign to bring Election Day registration to Massachusetts. None of those reforms will make ours a fully participatory democracy overnight, but they will pave the way. And one thing I always want to emphasize is that those campaigns are democratic, not just in their ends, but in their means. It takes ordinary Americans calling their legislators, organizing in their communities, and really being those small d Democrats in order to get them passed. And that kind of collective action, commitment to the common good, is the kind of citizenry that we really need.
Thank you very much for being with us. And finally, if people want to get some more information, you've got the website they can check out?
Yes, of course. They can go to commoncause.org/Massachusetts.
Thank you very much for being with us.
All right. Thank you.
Kristina Mensik from Common Cause, Massachusetts.